Thanks everyone for coming to this great community call. We've got a lot of really fun stuff. I'm Martin. I work in product design and DX at Hasura. And yeah, this week we've got a ton of great things for this month in terms of, we've got mutations in Oracle and I think it's MySQL actually. We've got logical models. We've got some fun stuff around how we're routing requests and things like that through Auth hooks and things like that. So we've got a ton of great stuff, including an early preview of Hasura version 3.0, which is currently in development and going to be sort of coming out coming soon. We're going to have like a lot more on that, but this is going to be like an early sneak preview kind of event where you're going to be able to take a look and see some of our early planning for where we're going next with Hasura. But yeah, let's get started. And yeah, so here's some of the agenda. So yeah, we've got like web auth importing from OpenAPI. So like if you have hundreds of different REST endpoints, you can import them. We've got a ton of fun stuff, so like first and foremost, if you have questions as we're going through any of this, feel free to share them in the chat. Our team will be able to sort of like Q&A, question and answer some of those with you. We're going to have our own Q&A where Dan Harvey and I chat throughout the through one of the demos. But yeah, there's some swag that's up for grabs. So, there's some awesome socks, there's some cups, there's some stickers. Everybody loves the Hasura stickers you slap on the back of your laptop. I personally want a pair of those socks. I really want one. But yeah, I guess we'll get started. I'm going to call Gavin. He's going to sort of talk through MySQL and Oracle. We've got some really interesting stuff around mutations coming up. So I'm going to hand it off to Gavin and he can sort of take us through that. Thanks, everyone.
Basically, what we have here set up are two sample databases using the data set that we often use for demo, the Chinook database. So we have a MySQL Chinook database, albums, artists, tracks, that sort of thing, and an Oracle Chinook database. And these have been kind of set up here. So we have our Oracle and our MySQL data connectors and our MySQL and our Oracle sources. So you can see that these are, regular tables, regular data sources, stuff like that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do some kind of standard CRUD mutations on both of these sources. So first for MySQL, we'll do an insert on the artist table. So we'll insert some artist named Foo. And then we get back this artist. Delete that. Then we'll do an update on that artist that we inserted and update the name from Foo to Foo2. Again, this is still MySQL because we have the lowercase table name. And we get our new row there. Finally, we'll delete that artist that we just updated. So delete where name equals Foo2. And one affected rows, we get our returning, stuff like that. So moving on to Oracle, we'll do the same thing, but we're going to insert an album this time. You can tell it's Oracle because we have our uppercase table names. So we'll insert title Foo, artist ID 1. And we get that. We'll do an update on that album, update the name from Foo to Foo2. We get that. And then finally, we'll delete our Foo2 album, run, and we get that. So it wasn't meant to be a super impressive demo, but the goal was more to show that all the things that you're used to working sort of work here in MySQL and Oracle, with the exception of you can't do nested inserts yet. So the one thing we can't do is we can't insert, say, an artist along with a set of albums. But all the standard things that you're used to are working. So yeah, that's pretty much my demo.
No, and that's super awesome, Gavin. I think it's really like I know like you were kind of like it's not like impressive, but like the reality is that like this kind of functionality that you're sort of showcasing is is really like at the core of like Hasura, that we want to be like the data engine for, like it's kind of like all your data sources. So like we're rolling out like MySQL, we're rolling out Oracle, and like, you know, like we're like, this is like part of like one of like the biggest things that we're working on over the course of the year, which is kind of like really like having that sort of data engine that can support any kind of data source under the hood kind of thing. So I think that's really awesome. That was really cool what you just kind of showed off there in terms of like the capabilities. Thanks, man. So yeah, the next up, we've got David Mulaney and Dan Harvey. So I think logical models, I'll give it kind of like a prelude. It's a kind of like anytime you were kind of like, hey, I want to do this in Hasura, but you weren't able to. You were kind of like, oh, like I got to create a function. I got to create a view for that. Anytime you like wanted to do something, logical models is kind of the solution for that. It lets you kind of like take the execution engine and like customize it to your data sources. You know, needs to be able to like, execute arbitrary things on your data source. So I'm gonna leave it to them to do the rest of the explanation. I'm not gonna steal all the thunder for it, but here you go. I'm gonna drop off. I'll let David, I think you're gonna take over for the presentations.
Yeah, so Martin already touched on this, but the motivation here is that the auto-generated schema that we provide as part of the HGE is super powerful, but it'll never address all of the use cases that you can dream up, as well as all the native capabilities of the databases we support, especially as we add more databases. You know, we have Oracle, MySQL, Snowflake. You know, these CDWs have a lot of exotic functions that will not be part of the auto-generated schema, but we want to provide methods for you to leverage these capabilities. And so like, and traditionally, I would say like, you know, we've said, oh, you could still do this, but you have to create a view or a function in the database. And there's two problems with that. You know, database practitioners don't always want to give DML privileges to everyone in the world. And also, you know, all of a sudden you have hundreds of views inside the database that might not be applicable to everyone using the database. This database might be used for multiple things, and Hasura in the front end that it supports, or whatever you're supporting with Hasura, might just be a part of it. So this feature was previously referred to as parameterized queries. The GitHub issue I have linked here. We are going to update it following this call to reflect that we're calling it logical models, as well as add some of the use cases that I will cover today. And if you want to get more information, or if you have any input about the feature or want to be included in future kind of early beta demos, please email me. After I'm done presenting, I'll include this link in my email and in the Zoom chat. So just to go over some use cases, I already mentioned you know, views and even DML privileges, but like heavily optimized queries, like some of these, especially the distributed databases like CockroachDB and Yugabyte, have special kind of partitioning methods that you can leverage and kind of optimized queries that you can come up with. Complex aggregations that aren't covered by our schema. Group by and having. In some point in the future, we will probably support some kind of group by method in our auto-generated schema, but we'll never be able to address all of the kind of group by workflows that you could ever dream up. So this will obviously help a lot for that. And then full text search, calling stored procedures, you know, complex date math and window functions are just some of the things in interviewing users that they've kind of come up with. So here's an example of how it shows up in our metadata. This is what would be a logical model, and you can see, you know, the type is a query. We're initially supporting queries. We'll add support for mutations at some point in the future. But you can see here, there's this. What this is it's returning all articles that are about like are longer than a specific length. So if you were trying to, you know, come up with like a product qualified lead, and you were like a social, you know, blogging application, you might say, I want to find out all the users that are writing long articles and stuff like that. So this would be an example of that. And this is just an example of something that isn't currently supported in auto-generated schema. The demo I'm going to show you is going to be using the console, but for the beta that we plan to release, We will have updates to the UI. This is not live now. This is just a preview of what's currently in development. But this is the idea of like you can add one of these things. It lives and breathes in Hasura, not in the database. And you can write any kind of SQL you can dream up in the section below. Again, this is the timeline. We're kind of in early alpha right now. In April, we're planning on releasing a beta with CLI and console support. And then depending on the feedback we get from users during that beta, we'll release it to the GA. In this demo, I'm just going to show, because of constraints on time, I'm going to quickly show just like running a complicated query. But future demos, we're planning on showing the use of parameters, permissions, and calling stored procedures. Here we go. So here's an example of like another complicated query. We're using the Chinook dataset. And what we're going to do here is we're trying to find the average number of albums and average duration of albums for each artist in the Chinook dataset. So this is an example of just a complex aggregation that would usually be impossible using our GraphQL schema. I've already run the command to track this. And what I'm using kind of curl commands because this isn't natively supported in the CLI or console yet. So you'll see here, what we're doing is we're counting the number of albums, and then we're rounding and averaging and finding the floor. And then here, this is the part of the query that's going to find all the tracks and then average the duration. Because this is not stored directly as metadata in the Chinook database, we need to calculate it. So hopefully this runs. Yeah, and so you can see here, running this query for each Miles Davis, he has average album duration of 64 minutes and the average tracks of 13. So this was kind of a simple example that we wanted to show, just to show like a complex aggregation that you usually wouldn't be able to do. But again, these logical models will support passing parameters as well as be able to be used for other things in the future as well.
Sweet. Yeah. So I'll take over from there. Like, I love this feature so much. Like it's kind of, it adds that sort of availability of like extensibility for Hasura, and the ability to sort of like customize the system as you need for any use case kind of thing. Now we've got Dan Harvey on the line with us who, wait, yeah, there you go, Dan, who actually worked on like sort of developing a bunch of elements around this feature. So Dan, is it okay? Is it cool with you if I just like sort of help you with a couple questions and we can go back and forth a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes.
Sweet. So yeah, I guess like the main thing that like we're always concerned about is kind of like performance. So in terms of this kind of system where like you're defining your own queries and then running them through the system, how is the performance? Is there anything we're doing special with it? Is there anything that we're doing to like process those queries on our side?
So the trick that's kept it performant is that everything ends up in one. Your SQL gets smashed into a common table expression, a CTE, and then we sort of pluck the things from it that we'd want, like a table, which means that this gives the database a view of the whole query, and it gets to optimize everything that it wants. So you're giving the database the best chance of doing the most sensible thing. So yeah, it's great. So I mean, we ran some like preliminary tests against sort of like using a logical model like it in the place of a view. So sort of saying, well, as a different, I think the same way you would a view, and it was pretty comparable. We'd like to do some more benchmarking before we brag about it, but it was pretty much the same. So that's great. Nice. That was very reassuring, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah.
As it was afterward.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like it shows that like we're not like adding too much latency in the middle there as we're trying to. Yeah. And then like in terms of like safety, because like you're kind of like writing ad hoc queries, is there anything that we're doing like to like ensure safety as users kind of adding queries in the
So we there's a sort of a templating language. I don't know if you could see it in David's example, but you give it a bunch of, say, PostgreSQL in case of Postgres, and you can use little curly. I'll put them in the chat. So you'd be like select star from users where user ID equals ID. So you've got your little curly guys there, so you can put in, so you can interpolate arguments, which you could then pass into the thing. But we only let you put those in where you'd be able to put in a prepared argument. So the nice thing about that is that we turn them into prepared arguments, and any escaping we make Postgres' problem. So our trick to stop you doing a thing is to make sure that we don't make a bad version of Postgres' really good support for not letting you mess up. So yeah. That's our trick. It's like, don't roll your own cryptography. Don't try and make your own. Don't try and fix that problem with escaping in databases yourself. So we're avoiding that completely. So,
no, and then that's a great method. I think that should sort of make everyone feel a little bit better about it, because it's kind of like, like there's a lot of great utilities within Postgres, so we might as well like lean on them a little bit, especially for this version, which is kind of Postgres specific. Now, like that's kind of like the creation and the execution, but on our side, some of the utility that we still have, do we still have the ability to have like permissions for these, or like similar to how we would use around something like a function or a view, let's say?
Yeah, totally. So we've got the column and row permissions that you'd have on a table you can use on the output of a logical model. It's mostly the same, all of the same stuff. Fortunately, they're not wildly different internally. So anything you'd be able to do, if you selected just the whole, you made a logical model that just selected the table, you'd be able to do no less than you'd do if you're working with the table directly. That would be a huge waste of your time, but it's good to know that you can if that's something that excites you.
No, that's fair too, because it's kind of like something where like if you're doing your permission models in Hasura, like you might want to continue like using things around the app, like roles and stuff like that. Of things that we've had before, so we've had like permissions in our system, so like we also are like kind of a Haskell shop, and like we write all of our like our server architecture is based on Haskell. Was there anything that like sort of helped you when using Haskell that like helped in the development of this as a feature?
Yes, and this is going to sound terrible about me as a software developer, as a consummate professional, but it allowed us to do some of the implementation before we could fully understand it, because we knew that it had to work the same way as tables. So a lot of it we just kind of did and followed the types until we had the same thing as tables, and we're like, oh wow, well great, we've got a permissions model now, and you run all the tests and you're like, oh wow, we really do. And now we've looked at it and reviewed it, we understand it, but it was remarkable how much it helped us. It guided us into the implementation, if you see what I mean. That was great.
Yeah.
So if you want to write, this sounds awful. If you want to write code you don't understand, it's a great language. We understand it now, is a disclaimer. But that's been great. And the other thing that's been really nice is that we implemented this all for Postgres first, and adding more database. We've been in the process of adding more databases, and like I'd say 80% of the work is just already done. You switch it on, and then you've just got to tell each database how to write the SQL. Everything else is kind of fine. Haskell lets you generalize over, so you can say, well, this is the SQL Server version. We've got a different set of, say, scalar types, so it knows to do exactly the same thing as before, but with this set of scalar types that work with SQL Server, and that just sort of works. And then you just got to turn it into BigQuery flavored SQL or SQL Server flavored SQL. Great.
There's a question in the chat actually that you might be able to help out with. Are there any restrictions on the input parameters such as type, float, JSON, or post like GIS types and stuff like that?
So none that we've made. Currently we accept anything that Postgres accepts as a scalar type. If we don't recognize it, we just throw it to Postgres and say, is this something you like? And Postgres decides if it's something it likes. So there's no specific support, but there's nothing stopping it, if you see what I mean. We haven't got any sort of tests that go into any depth on that yet.
That's fair. That's fair.
Oh, yeah, to answer that question much more in the chat, much more comprehensively than I have. Listen to him, not me.
That's good. And up above that as well. So I know Sean asked a question about Postgres, and I think you started answering as well. So like kind of like we have like Postgres support, which is dropping as our first version, and then like in terms of other support for other databases, how do you see that going later on, kind of thing?
It's going fine. Our preliminary tests are working, so those should follow. they seem to broadly work. So we'll check that more comprehensively. But right now it's looking fine. We've got we seem to have the Postgres flavors working, so like Cockroach and Citus, and both SQL Server and BigQuery as well seem to be they're working thus far. So we're going to do a bit more. I mean, the test suite we have for Postgres now works for them. So now we're going to sort of do some tests that are a bit more database specific to make sure that we're not missing something. Yeah,
Awesome.
soon.
Go for it. Oh yeah, so I guess I was going to finish off. I'm going to ask you a very unfair question. So like I haven't prepped you at all for this. So what are you going to use the feature for? Like do you have any examples in mind that you're going to use the feature for? I have one if you want to mulligan on it at all. But was there anything like a sticky thing that you're like, oh, I wish I had this and now it's out there that you can use it for?
I mean, I'm very excited because I like messing around very scrappily. So I don't have to change the data. I can sort of get a database and start doing horrible, awful things without having to run migrations. So I mean, as a very lazy person, it's very appealing to me that I don't have to think about too much syntax and I can just start doing weird stuff. That probably says more about my development methodology, which again may not reflect on me as a consummate professional. But
no, that's a great answer for it as well, because like I have one where it was like kind of like using like I had like a demo using like authorization, doing some cool stuff in the functions kind of thing. And like, I had to create like a dummy table to like return everything to before. So I'm excited to like be able to like return it to like just like, not have dummy tables and things like that. That's what.
Oh yeah, there's lots of that kind of stuff that goes away, which is great. So if you're lazy, it's just going to get so much lazier.
Love it. Awesome. So Dan, thanks so much. I really appreciate me like pepper you with questions there. And I think we're going to move on to our next demos. Oh, webhook. Okay, so this one's great. So webhook auth caching. Again, I'm gonna let the video sort of speak for itself, but Paritosh has got a great demo here. It's kind of like Hasura, fast, speed, and we get there by making less requests and sending less unnecessary data. And like that's what this whole feature is about. If you've ever been using like, wanted to use webhook or like had that webhook JWT sort of fight in your mind, and you're like, oh, webhook, I'm gonna have to hit the API every single time. This demo is going to sort of help you with that. So I'm going to throw up this video, and I think Paritosh or somebody from the team is also in the chat if you'd like to ask any questions at all. But we'll just run this video, and I'll give you a demo of it.
And I will be talking about this new feature that we were working on. It is called Webhook Auth caching. So you can try out this feature in 2.22. So that version is in beta, so we can try out it in 2.22 beta 1. So let's talk about auth mode first. So we have a GraphQL client here, and we have our GraphQL engine here, which is connected to a data source. And the GraphQL engine is also connected to an external auth hook. So this auth hook is maintained by the user, and it can authenticate the GraphQL request. So what happens is our GraphQL client sends a GraphQL request to Hasura, and it doesn't send any authentication variables. For example, it doesn't send the authentication token or the admin secrets. Now, what Hasura can do is it gets the request and it sends those request data to an external auth hook, and this auth hook can see the request and it can authenticate this request. So what this auth hook will do, it will create an auth JSON. Like it will contain some variables like what is the role of the user and any other JSON variables that this auth hook service needs with. And it will send that authentication JSON variables back to Hasura, and Hasura will use this authentication JSON variable to serve the GraphQL request. Now, in this auth hook mode, Hasura can now cache the auth JSON variables that it receives. Now, what this means is like when Hasura authenticates from an external hook, it will look for some variables like cache control or expire, and it will use those to determine a TTL for caching, and it will cache those JSON variables for that particular time. And it can use those cached JSON variables for serving other similar GraphQL requests. Now, what are the benefits of this caching? We will get a faster GraphQL API because we are eliminating an extra network call that GraphQL engine had to do to the Auth server for authenticating the GraphQL requests. And we will also have less load on the Auth server because now Hasura will only hit the Auth server when it needs to validate the cache again. Now, I ran some testing on my local PC. So with casing, it takes pretty less time as compared to without casing, as you can see here. In the without casing case, Hasura will have to communicate with an external Auth server, so it might take some time. And it also reduced the request per minute on the external Auth. So with casing, it is pretty low as compared to without casing under similar load. So there are some technical gotchas associated with this feature. So the first one is that Hasura can be configured to send the request body to the author. And if a user decides to send request body to the author, then Hasura will cache the token for that particular GraphQL request only. So this means that if the GraphQL request changes, then Hasura will have to validate it again from the external webhook. Now, also the expiry for the cache token is decided based on the response body that it receives from the author. And as I already told that Hasura will look for the variable based on the case control or the expires, and it will decide the TTL based on those variables. So you can read the docs for more information. And so in the Hasura docs, we have this new configuration also, which will enable Hasura to send the request body or like not send the request body. And we have this caching thing documented also, so you can read more about it. Now let's have a look at the demo. So I have a GraphQL engine running here, which is connected to a Redis instance. So this means that caching is enabled, and it is authenticating from an external Auth server. And as you can see here that I have disabled the admin secret header. So this means that Hasura will run in the Auth mode. Now, if I run the GraphQL query, we can see that it takes some time. And like if I run it again, we can see that it takes far less time as compared to the first run, right? Because it is using the cached session variables for authenticating these new requests. So I have another GraphQL engine running here, which does not have casing enabled. So what this means is that for every request, it will hit the external Auth server for authenticating, and like it will always take the more or less the same response time. Like because now this is actually limited by the external Auth server that I have. Now I have this Redis here, so you can see that it is caching the session variables that it received from the Auth server. Now this is the demo for the book Auth caching. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Is that other? So yeah, that feature itself is just like a huge. I just love this in terms of giving you that sort of ability to choose which kind of like Auth style is best for you, and like we're sort of even smoothing over some of the rough edges, like around webhooks and around the ability to cache them and make them faster, and reduce those round trips all the way around in terms of the like usability of using webhooks. So I think we can probably put that in the chat, the GitHub issue that was that was responding to, and yeah, we'll move on to the next area that we were going to talk through. So we've got Rahul and Daniele here, and yeah, this one's cool. This is really, really neat. So if you work with actions a lot and you work with OpenAPI and you have like lots and lots of REST endpoints, like one of the biggest things that you probably think about is like, how do I get these from here into here, right? So this is going to be a demo where the team is going to be going over how you can really effectively import those like catalogs of REST APIs into your Hasura actions and have that sort of mesh created really quickly and easily using Hasura. So I'm going to leave it to Rahul or Daniele to sort of take over from here. But yeah, we'll start go from there.
As Martin mentioned, excited to announce this feature in general availability. Ability to convert OpenAPI spec-based REST API into a GraphQL API via the Hasura Actions capability. It is important because there is growing adoption of OpenAPI standard. More and more REST APIs are following OpenAPI standard, and more enterprises and have REST APIs. So REST APIs are not going away at the same pace we would have assumed. And that is why this feature really helps in providing quick access to REST-based remote data sources. And what it will help you is, it will help you save significant time to create a new action. Yes, you can do manual creation of action and get a REST endpoint into Hasura, but we are changing that paradigm from, let's say, number of minutes and even hours to seconds. And the whole goal of the feature is to enable quick plug and play with REST API sources here. A little bit, so we have a public RFC opened. I will send the link for it in a short while. But there you can understand more about the implementation. There are three main aspects of implementation: parsing and translating the OpenAPI spec, manipulating GraphQL schema, and then auto-generating Hasura GraphQL API. You can learn more about how we did that implementation in that RFC. And we also have a growing product backlog here. For example, only OS 3.0 is supported right now. OS 3.1 support is on the backlog. URL form encoded support is another thing. Now we're importing REST APIs. What about other data formats such as gRPC out there? So that's another contender. REST as a data source. So right now you're importing REST APIs via action, which will not give you the ability to introspect a REST API source. So this feature request is about adding REST as a data source, just like you can do GraphQL remote schema right now. And then bulk grouping of actions. If you have 5 APIs with, let's say, 30 endpoints, with each API, you are looking at around 150 actions. So just how to make your life easier navigating the number of actions and maybe grouping them by APIs or by tags. And there are other product backlog items as well. So we highly encourage you to read the RFC and upvote, provide comments on which feature you would want in the upcoming weeks or months. With that, let me stop sharing and hand it over to Danielle for a demo of this feature.
In this demo, we're going to integrate a REST API, and specifically the Trello REST API, into Hasura GraphQL engine in just a few clicks. For this demo, I prepared the Trello board, which is now empty, but we are going to populate it via API. As you may know, of course, Trello has a REST API that you can interact with. But here, let's say you want to use it via GraphQL with Hasura Actions. You can integrate endpoints into the GraphQL engine, and we developed this feature to make it even more convenient and easy to do it. And okay, for those who doesn't know, OpenAPI is a standard for defining REST APIs in a formal way. And I got the Trello OpenAPI specification from this website, APIs Guru, where you can find many OpenAPI specifications. Okay, let me show the feature. You can click here on import from OpenAPI, and you have a text area where you can paste the specification, or you can upload a file from here. Once you uploaded the specification, the base URL is automatically populated with the one found in the specification, but you can edit it. And you have the list of operations here on the right. If you have too many operations, as in this case, you can filter them out via method or via text search. For example, here, I want to import an endpoint for creating a card in a board. So this is the endpoint, it is a post. And this is the method for adding a card. I just click create, and I get the action automatically created. I can show you. Okay. I can show you the things that have been created. In particular, we generated the GraphQL types, both the action definition and types, and we get all and everything needed for integrating. So in particular, the REST connectors, this is a post, this is the URL, and there are some query params to be sent. And also we generate the request and response transforms for talking with the API. Now let me create also the other method that we are going to use in this demo, which is the delete. So I want to use this method. Okay, let me create it. And I can show you this in action. I'm in the GraphQL playground, and let me copy and paste the operations that I created. Okay, this is going to use the first operation that we imported, the add card. Okay, as you can see, there is a card here. I've just created it, and also I can test the other method, which is the delete card. Okay, I want to delete the card that I just created, so I'm copying the ID. Okay, as you can see, the card is gone, so it worked. And okay, let me show you another thing. I want to highlight how easy it is to import many endpoints. Let's say I have dozens of endpoints that I want to import. I just click create, and okay, you can have all those endpoints imported automatically. And that's it for the demo. Thank you. And next, Rahul will represent the RFC for this feature.
Thank you, Daniel. I pasted the RFC in the chat. Really recommend everyone to go through it and let us know what more features you would need on this and as you're going through it. In the interest of time, let's not go to the RFC. Let's move on to the next topic. If Martin, do you want to take us off there?
Yeah, I'll take over from there. That feature itself is pretty hype. Like, you know, doing a like, you know, creating those automatically instead of by hand is definitely just like a huge time saver. Each one of those you click price saves you a few minutes of time. So you do a whole API, you know, off OpenAPI, it definitely saves like lots and lots of time, like 100x faster kind of thing. So, but yeah, thank you, Daniele. Thank you, Rahul. Next up, so yeah, we're gonna chat with Docs. Rob's here. He's gonna do like a quick breakdown of what's up and what's new. And Rob, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Martin, and thanks to everybody for being on this. It's great to see people from all over the community here. Obviously, we spend a lot of time in Docs thinking about the user experience and thinking about what everyone does on a daily basis with Hasura, just trying to find things as quickly as possible. And we wanted to run through a few things with you. Can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see my screen? We're good. Awesome. You can see if you've been to the Docs site recently, we've been kind of modifying the UI a bit and trying to put things in shorter reach for everybody in the community. We're trying to also appeal to different modalities for how people want to learn. So we have things in text, but we also have video to go along with the majority of our features and documentation now. An example we're going to look at today is going to be the auth section, which has been completely rewritten in general, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But there's two pieces that I want to focus on that's going to be consistent through most directories. And that's an overview page and a quick start page. And what we've tried to do is give you actionable options for everything that you can reach for within Hasura. So you'll see that we have, again, kind of the same layout at the top, but we also have a get started, and then we have a deep dive. So this is going to be present throughout the majority of directories within the Docs site. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about these quick starts. Our growth team within the company created a project called One Click Deploy, and you may have seen this recently, but we have a sample app within documentation that you can actually deploy to Hasura Cloud with one click. With all the quick starts that we have throughout Docs, you can actually use the majority of features within about 15 minutes, which we think is pretty awesome to be able to kind of rapidly get a taste for how Hasura can solve a lot of different problems in the development world. So we encourage you to check those things out. One of the things that we would like to talk to everybody about today really is that we're looking for feedback from users in the community like yourself. Like we said, the authentication section has been completely rewritten. Sean Parker-Ross, who's also on this call, took the lead on that and did a great job on what was a monumental task of working through everything that we have in Auth-in and Auth-Z. So a lot of cool things there. The ways that we're looking for that feedback are primarily going to be in Discord. So you'll start to see some posts go out pretty soon, which are asking for the opportunity for things like user interviews, for the chance at some swag. And additionally, we have an email address, which I think Marion is going to drop in the chat for us here, that we are, happy to get feedback from as well. If you want to reach out there instead of Discord, and I made that as short as possible. So Martin, back to you.
No, that's awesome, Rob. And just I thank you too, because like when I first started Hasura, it's a while, I've been here for a while now. Like I learned Hasura by using the docs, and even just over the last few months, like the docs have gotten even better than they already were, and they were pretty easy to understand before. So one, thank you for all that. Two, you have a really nice background behind you.
Thank you so much.
It is very atmospheric.
It's always good to hear those appreciations. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So, okay, we're going to throw up the screen one more time. And yeah, so what is a community call without a community demo? So we've got Deepak here with us from BroxyHQ. He's going to be running through a quick demo for us. I'm not going to spoil too much of it. So Deepak, would you like to take over from me? And yeah, you can run through your demonstration.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Martin. And thank you, Team Hasura, for this opportunity. So I'm Deepak, co-founder and CEO at BroxyHQ. We're also an open source company like Hasura. We build security building blocks so that developers don't have to reinvent things around security. So in connection with that, we have a single sign-on block, which helps you kind of plug in single sign-on into enterprise identity providers like Okta, Azure Active Directory. And this is a very quick demo to sort of show you how, and of course, we all know and love Hasura, and it makes authorization and authentication extremely modular, which means you can plug in anything that you like. And let me quickly do a screen share. So in this demo, I'm going to quickly show you how you can extend enterprise single sign-on beyond just authentication and sort of relay roles and groups and kind of connect that back to your your GraphQL engine via Hasura into your data source, allowing you to sort of, bring in roles and permissions without having to build a whole layer around it if your app doesn't need that. At the same time, if you have a complex, role-based engine already, it again ties in quite nicely with that because you can kind of relay that information from the identity provider. So pretty much a sync that you don't have to then, do in two places. So in this case, very quickly, I'll show you Microsoft Azure Active Directory, but this pretty much works with any other well-known identity provider out there like Okta. Even Google Workspace allows you to kind of configure single sign on the back of a well-known protocol called SAML. If you're not very familiar with SAML, it's quite an ancient protocol, so based on XML. And it's pretty much the predecessor of OAuth 2.0, which we all know and use quite regularly. The hard thing about SAML is, of course, taking all that XML. There's public key, private key cryptography involved to sort of validate some of these requests. But what we at BroxyHQ do is we give you a proxy, which kind of then translates that to OAuth 2.0, which then effectively means it works. Authentication is pretty much well known then to plug in. But fundamentally, SAML is an authentication protocol, still widely popular in the enterprise world. And although, Auth 2.0 OIDC OpenID Connect is supposed to sort of succeed it, it's still taking some time. So before we jump into the demo, I wanted to sort of, just quickly set up the context for it. We have an example application that's running on Next.js using Next.auth as the authentication library. And in this case, we'll show you how to connect that to something like Azure Active Directory, to the actual login, but also relay the role back to your Hasura application. Standard setup, Hasura is a GraphQL engine using Postgres. And we have BroxyHQ, which is a thin proxy in between to just translate the SAML protocol login into an OAuth 2.0 login. So I'll quickly jump into the demo itself. So in the interest of time, I've set things up already. A simple Docker setup running effectively 3 services, the Postgres database, Jackson, which is our single sign-on proxy, and the GraphQL engine, which of course is on the back of Hasura, connecting to Postgres. So the first thing we do is set up, the set of tables we need for authentication within Hasura. It's a very simple setup here. We have users and an accounts table. So as soon as we've logged in, we create the users and the respective accounts. In this case, it's pretty much a one-to-one mapping. The other thing we do here is the admin role comes in by default, but we've added another role called developer in this case, just to demonstrate how you can do the role-based access here. And the permissions given to developer role is effectively that they can read only rows that are relevant to them. In this case, the header containing the user ID is sort of used to effectively filter out what they can access. So in many ways, this is an admin role has access to everything, but a developer is restricted to just their data. So since we have this set up, I can quickly jump into what we've done for the single sign-on side of things. We have 2 connections set up. One is to Azure Active Directory, which actually has an admin role configured internally. So that means, when I log in using Azure Active Directory, an admin role gets attached to my login. But the other identity provider, in this case, it's a mock identity provider, comes with no roles, and that will effectively default to a developer. Before I dive into the actual demo, I want to quickly show you how this looks. Hopefully, none of you ever have to do this. There's usually an IT admin that kind of needs to do all of this setup within Azure Active Directory. But essentially, everything starts with what is known as a SAML application. It has, a bunch of things thrown in with it. It needs to know, who to connect to. In this case, they connect to us. And more importantly, who can access this application. And they're the only ones who can effectively sort of, come in and log in on the back of this. So this is configured inside of what is known as enterprise applications for Azure. We've got one set up for this demo. And let me quickly show you very briefly a summary of what it is. So all it needs is 2 identifiers. In this case, it's talking to, because everything here happens on the back of the browser. So it needs to know, once the login happens, who to connect to. In this case, it's connecting to my localhost 5225, where BroxyHQ is running locally, which then picks up the SAML response and then translates it to a login. You can map a bunch of attributes, and this is where the magic actually happens. Other than your standard profile, email, username, first name, last name, etc., you can assign roles as well. And this is this is effectively where the translation happens from the identity provider side. When I set myself up, I said, I will get the admin role, and that kind of gets translated across. A lot of providers don't necessarily support roles itself, and that's okay because they do something called groups. And effectively groups is, instead of adding Deepak directly, I create an admin group, add myself to that group. I create a developer group, add someone else to the developer group. And then I can use that mapping to say, okay, Deepak is an admin, or someone else is just a developer. So that's what I've set up. And you get a XML on the back of this, which is already all pre-configured. So we can skip those steps. Now jumping back into the demo itself. Fairly standard web application. We are right now not authenticated. So wherever we go in, we'll see an access denied as expected. Which means, we now have to log in to see something useful. I'll first log in with my developer role. So it's obviously multi-tenant. It just uses the domain as an identifier. Now, this is the mock sample service, which effectively just pretends to log you in, but is very useful for testing the single sign-on piece. So now I'm logging in as Jackson at example.com. No roles configured, so it defaults to developer. Now I can, of course, see my profile, but if I jump into this tab, I only see one row, which is just me, and there's no way for me to access any other data at this point.
Hey, Deepak, sorry to interfere. We are running about, so if you could maybe we have an announcement to make to the community. So sorry to be that person, but
no. I'll wrap it up in a minute. Awesome. Now, if I sign in as an admin on the back of Azure Active Directory, see my profile. I've got the role coming through, and now if I go into this tab here, I see both the users that were connected. So this effectively means you're an admin and I have access to everything else. So in a nutshell, a lot of moving parts, but this is how you kind of get your authorization sort of coming through to Hasura. Thank you very much.
Deepak, thanks so much for that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. So BroxyHQ, everyone should go check it out. Also, Sam L. Jackson, I like your I love that name.
Thank you.
You say it and it's like an oral name. It's like it's Samuel. Yeah, it's super solid as a library name, and all the
Pulp Fiction fans.
Oh yeah, I feel it. All the it's all like easy to do, like single sign on until you gotta integrate with SAML, and then it's like, oh, okay, a little bit of scope here. I'm gonna throw it over to Rahul. So Rahul's gonna be talking about our announcement around version 3.0, which is coming up really soon. So Rahul, I'm gonna leave it to you.
Thanks, Martin, and hi everyone. Very excited to break the news about Hasura V3 to all of you. If you could stay with us for a few minutes. Sorry for running over late. Let me start with what vision we are trying to do with Hasura V3. We are in this community group with a lot of V2 and V1 users. And with V3, we want to achieve the vision of Hasura being a CDN-like layer for everything real-time, transactional, analytical, and streaming data. So having the Cloudflare CDN vibe, but for data with Hasura. There are many things that we will be sharing over the coming weeks and months on our community calls, GitHub, Discord. But today we will specifically talk about metadata. There are other aspects in V3 which you would really like, such as serverless pricing, edge caching. But that is for another community call. Today we're going to deep dive into metadata and give you a preview of what's coming. So first, the metadata handling changes, and you can let know on comments or chat if any of this resonates with you. But challenges as a user is that we often want more control over how the schema is generated, what names are used, how types are generated, things like camel casing. If you want some resolvers to be there and not to be there, these are some of the pain points which you have been facing. Being dependent on a metadata DB implies that we have another thing to run and maintain in production, one more thing to care about. Thirdly, Hasura right now depends on upstream services like Postgres or remote GraphQL service to build a GraphQL schema on the fly. Means that the Hasura GraphQL schema is not available unless the upstream services are available. Now, failure modes that you're not ready for sometimes really become a problem. And you need to run Hasura to get schemas. And that usually gets you into a chicken egg problem during iterative development with Hasura. And many users have been talking to us about this. And lastly, a new metadata change or a Hasura cold start can take time to get built and rolled out, sometimes even several minutes. So what with V3 we are trying to do is go after all these pain points and challenges you are facing as a user and make things easier for you. So this is a preview into what V3, at least the metadata side of it, would look like. There is going to be a new metadata structure based on the GraphQL data specification. There is a GitHub link for the GraphQL data specification for you to kind of peruse and start learning about the new concepts introduced there. But the main benefit that it will give us, it will allow a structured way for users to control how schema is generated and any customization that is required. So as V2 users, do not get worried. We will provide you graceful mechanisms to migrate from V2 metadata to V3 metadata, kind of like the code mod experience. So GraphQL schema will be the same, nothing to worry for your clients, and we will not break anything. But under the hood, you will have this new structure of metadata that you would then, we firmly believe, slowly love to enjoy working with. And secondly, the big major change which is coming with Hasura V3 is that the build and production steps are separated out. Metadata build will do a one-time build and generate an binary artifact that can be loaded by a Hasura production instance some millisecond. And that opens a whole lot of opportunities for us to provide good developer experience when the build and production runtime are separated. No more you need to wait for the chicken egg problem, which I just alluded to in the previous slide. And with this, I want to just say that, hey, this is the beginning of a very important journey for our company and for our platform. Please join the working group and help us shape Hasura V3. You can reach out to me on Discord or reach out to our community on Discord, GitHub, or email me directly and this email ID here to get part of this user group or working group which we are forming for Hasura V3. There will be demos in the next community call. There will be discussions around it, and this will be a recurring segment in the community call till we get all of you on V3. That's the ambition. So I know we are over time. If you are still here with us, let us know what you're thinking, what questions you have. Do you want to be a part of that working group? Let me know here, please. Yes. So if anyone wants to unmute and just say aloud any question, I think that would be great. Otherwise, I'm combing through all the questions. What all is involved in being the working group? I would say you will have early access to the features we are building. You will have early access to the blueprints, and you will have a big say in things like metadata handling, developer experience, even pricing, I would say. So collaboration with product and engineering teams at a very close level would be what the working group would include. It would include some periodic sessions with the product engineering group around what features would make sense for you. And most importantly, will it be early access before the community, so that once we show something to the community, we have already vetted with some power users who want to be part of the working group. Yes, so I'll share the GraphQL data specification link with you, but you can search for GraphQL data specification on Hasura GraphQL repo. Any breaking changes from V2 to V3 with YAML files, Hasura Cloud usually auto updates. There will be some breaking changes, but there will always be a path for that as well. And first of all, A, communication, very detailed communication on breaking changes, and B, a path for that. One of the breaking changes which you can envision from today is the metadata structure behind the scene is getting changed. So that is one aspect of it. the repo. Thank you, Balas, for sending that link. Requirements, I checked it. What is all, I think, working group. So yes, all of you just send an email right now. I'll get you in the working group. Any plans for a Prisma-like client API? That is not on the cards, I would say, Alex, but something we could definitely consider. And Shahid, again, is on the call. If he wants to say anything on this aspect, please continue, but I'll go through questions again. And thank you again for staying with us after on top of the hour as well. We really appreciate your engagement with us. Does this fix the force schema name for metadata? I'm not sure about what you say there, Brad, if you want to maybe provide
Sure.
some more clarity. Yeah.
So if you have multiple Hasura instances pointed, like for example, right now we previously had a schema per tenant, and they pulled in, it was too much memory. So we couldn't vertically scale the Hasura instance tall enough to be able to handle the size of all the schemas. So we actually spun out Hasura horizontally. So we were able to configure each one of those Hasura instances to point to a different schema for a different tenant, but all of the Hasura instances are forced to use the same schema name for storing metadata. So I actually have to spin up individual Postgres instances to hold all of those Hasura metadata schemas. So if I could actually specify the name that I wanted Hasura to use for the schema, I wouldn't have to manage all those extra Postgres databases.
Yes, and also if it, right now the size of the schema is also a big factor in that. So going forward, the new serverless architecture will have a very less footprint, and the schema will not be in memory. So that would bring the instance up immediately. And the particular use case you mentioned, I'm not sure right now, but about whether it will be solved in V3 or not. But again, this is great input for us to make sure that we are thinking of that use case as well. So thank you. Yes.
So your memory requirements are going to come way down for loading metadata, because
super down. Yes. So your tenancy, it will be request based tenancy now. You won't hold the tenant metadata state in the server anymore.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll reevaluate when we have access to V3 and see if that works for us then.
Yeah, because I think that's the main problem you have. Like the schemas are making your startup time just gruesome, I would believe.
Well, I mean, like I'm running them as persistent Hasura instances. It's just that the amount of memory that Hasura consumes as an intermediary layer versus other services that are running in the cluster, I can't dedicate that much memory. So I scale them down and bring them up when they're needed. But when they were all inside of one pod, then it just blew up for the scale of the number of tenants that I have.
Yeah, no, this makes complete sense, and this is one of the issues that we are trying to address with V3 and the architectural changes in V3. So yeah, metadata taking up too much memory is a problem that will be directly solved with V3.
Perfect. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yes, and please, if you're interested, please be part of the working group, and you will have first access to the server so that you can start thinking about any architectural or deployment changes you have to make in the months to come. And Balas, I'm not sure about HDB schema, but it's something we probably would have to learn about HDB schema, and then I can tell you whether it's similar to GDS. But GDS, in a very high level, we're introducing the concepts of model, fields, and edges, so that you're thinking about relationships and the domain model declaratively, and not post creating the schema. So think of it as modeling your domain first, and not only thinking about tables or one model, but what your application domain would look like. And yeah, so I think Shahid answered Alex's question there. I don't think there is any other question we have not answered so far. But Shahid and I are here hanging out. If you have any other questions or concerns or wish list, This is not the only time. The next community call is another time you could talk about this, or Discord or email. If you are sending requests on email right now, I'll set up the working group as soon as possible. Is that live as of today, or is coming? So the next community call, you will have a live demo of Hasura V3. So it's very near, Alex. Yeah, so metadata innovations happening. I would say a lot of cool stuff happening as well around pricing and edge caching. So we are excited, and hopefully you're excited as well. And if no other questions or comments, I think I leave it to you, Martin, to take us off, please. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll take us home. So we here we go. I'm going to take over the screen share for 1 sec. Share. So yeah, we've chatted through V3. That was really awesome. Yeah, and yeah, we'll keep on the going. We'll hear some more about it soon. And yeah, that's an incredible project. I'm really excited for it. I saw somebody ask about Prisma in terms of the schema. So I'm also on the product design and some of the DX side of things. So like one of the things that we're really holding as a tenet of version 3.0 is also that while still having the same ability to operate on your system with ClickOps and such, we'll still also have the ability to have this like declarative first model where you're able to edit things similar to a Prisma schema, but different, but like you'll be able to edit that. And that's also a first class citizen with the ClickOps. And we really want to smooth over that workflow between the two. So I'm really excited for that. This project's going to be incredible. So lastly, we have some community updates that we'll be going over. So thank you everyone for sticking with us. I know it's going a little bit long, but I've switched locations at one point during this meeting. So yeah, so to end off, so community updates, our swag winners. So we've got Alberto and James. Congratulations. I hope you get some socks because I really wanted those socks. They look really nice. Some stickers, some really fun stuff. So thank you for coming, asked some great questions. So cool, we'll send those over. And I think somebody from the team will be in touch with you about those. Data and API days. These are coming up. These are incredible events. If you're in New York or San Francisco on these dates, I hope I'm there so that I can go to this. But yeah, it's a great time to meet with like the Hasura team that's there, to like meet in person and talk with other members of the community about like sort of Hasura, authoring how you like work with the systems and stuff like that. There's usually some great presentations there. You can go hit the link and go check that out to see the event signups and specifics. But yeah, those two are really fun. There's a lot of fun that happens at those kind of events. And yeah, there's a webinar coming up. So learning how to use GraphQL with Hasura and CockroachDB. So like, do you need a database that will stay up and just like keep going no matter what you throw at it? You should go watch that. That'll be a lot of fun. Nuclear bomb just keeps going. GraphQL. So yeah, go check it out. We got a QR code there. I think you can also just search for this in Google and you'll get the link at it. Sorry, I didn't have the direct link there, but yeah, scan to get registered. And I'll leave this up for a sec. And while you do that, okay, I'll keep going. I hope everybody scanned. That sounds good. And then lastly, HasuraCon. So yeah, I know Rahul's going to be doing a presentation about the 3.0 here. And we're going to have lots of others. We already have some information on the events page of different presentations that are happening. I emceed last year. It was a long day of speaking. My throat hurt a little bit at the end, but HasuraCon, it's a lot of fun. It's just a fun event where we have like tons of community demonstrations like Deepak said that we're on earlier. There's usually like a ton of things like where I learn stuff while I'm watching the videos about like, oh, I didn't know I could do that with Hasura. And then it's usually a place where we like save like our really good bombs. We drop it there. That's where their good stuff is. So highly recommend going and signing up and yeah, and save the date. I don't know if we have the sign up yet. But yeah, if we do, sign up. If we don't, save the date, put it on your calendar and get ready because usually it's like, a couple days of a lot of different presentations, fun, and usually launch announcements. So yeah, our next community call as well, April 27th. Yeah, that's next month. It'll be a lot of fun, just like this one. And we're a little bit over. Oh, no, keep going. Discord. We have ChatGPT in there now where you can ask like a bot questions. There's like the pod in there. You can go and ask it questions. It knows all of our docs. It's got the vector DB with the context all hooked up. So you can ask it like, how do I make like a query? And it'll like give you queries and stuff. It's kind of insane to tell you the truth. I'm not really this is gonna do my job next time. So that's all good. And then lastly, yeah, like, do you want to help us make the community call better? We've got some feedback here. You can go to like our community demo section, submit a community demo if you'd like to speak at the next community call. But yeah, like we want to know, like, what are you looking for in this? Do you want to see more demos, less demos, more community demos? All those kind of things. More features. We'll do them when we can. But yeah, like, how can we make it better? Feel free to add any feedback you'd like there. And thank you. Finally, you made it. It's the end. And I hope to see all of you around here next month for our next community call. So thanks, everyone. Take care.